My wife, Madison, dropped the bombshell over dinner. It was a Thursday night, nothing special. I'd made us spaghetti, poured a couple of glasses of wine, and we were sitting across from each other at the dining table. She was unusually quiet, her fork pushing around the noodles on her plate. Finally, she cleared her throat. "James," she started, not meeting my eyes, "can we talk about something important?" I set my glass down, bracing myself. "Of course. What's on your mind?" She hesitated, twirling her hair, a nervous habit she'd had since college. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about our relationship." My stomach tightened. "Okay. I love you, James. You know that. But lately, I've been wondering if we're limiting ourselves," she said, her voice wavering. "Limiting ourselves how?" I asked, frowning. She exhaled, finally looking me in the eye. "I think we should consider opening our relationship." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, but she wasn't joking. Her face was serious, her expression carefully neutral. "Open our relationship?" I repeated slowly, trying to process what she was saying. "Yes," she said, her tone gaining confidence. "I think it could be good for us. A chance to explore other experiences, other people, without losing what we have." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Madison, we've been married for 7 years. We've always been committed to each other. Where is this coming from?" She looked away, fiddling with her napkin. "I've just been thinking about it for a while. A lot of couples do it, you know. It's not as taboo as it used to be." I leaned back in my chair, my appetite completely gone. "Is this about someone else?" I asked, my voice sharp. She froze, her eyes widening slightly before she shook her head.
No.
"No, of course not. This isn't about anyone specific. It's just something I think could bring us closer, make us stronger." I didn't believe her, not for a second. But I didn't press the issue yet. "I don't think so," I said firmly. "That's not the kind of marriage I want, Madison. If you need other people to be happy, maybe you need to reevaluate what you want." Her face fell, but she didn't argue. "I just thought it was worth a conversation," she mumbled, standing up and taking her plate to the sink. I watched her go, a knot forming in my chest. Something about this didn't sit right. I didn't know it yet, but that conversation was the beginning of the end. After Madison's proposal, things weren't the same. She started acting differently, subtle at first but noticeable. She'd spend more time on her phone, laughing at messages I wasn't privy to. Her work hours, once steady, suddenly became unpredictable. She started going out more, claiming she needed time to clear her head. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was overthinking. But every time I asked if something was wrong, her responses felt rehearsed. "No, James, everything's fine," she'd say with a forced smile. "I'm just figuring things out." I wanted to believe her, but my gut told me otherwise. The tipping point came one Friday night. Madison had been working late all week, and I decided to surprise her by bringing dinner to her office. When I arrived, her desk was empty. The lights were off, and the cleaning staff were the only people around. "Excuse me?" I asked one of the janitors. "Do you know where Madison Peterson might be?" The man gave me a puzzled look. "She hasn't been in all day, sir. She took the afternoon off." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I walked back to my car, my mind racing. Where was she? Who was she with? I felt a wave of anger and humiliation crash over me, but I forced myself to stay calm. When she came home later that night, her makeup was fresh, and her perfume lingered in the air. She smiled at me like nothing was wrong. "Hey, how was your night?" she asked casually, dropping her bag by the door. "Fine," I replied, my voice tight. "How about yours?" "Busy at the office." She hesitated just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. "Yeah, pretty hectic," she said, avoiding my eyes. That was the moment I knew. Madison wasn't waiting for my permission to open our relationship. She'd already started without me. The next morning I woke up early. Madison was still asleep, her phone charging on the nightstand. I'd never been the type to snoop, but after last night, I couldn't ignore my instincts anymore. I grabbed her phone, entered the passcode, something she'd never bothered to change, and opened her messages. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A thread labeled with just a heart emoji caught my attention. My stomach twisted as I opened it. The messages were explicit. "Last night was amazing. I can still feel you on me," he'd written. Her reply was worse. "You always know how to make me forget about everything else. I can't wait to see you again." I scrolled further, each word cutting deeper. There were pictures. Selfies of Madison in outfits I'd never seen, smiling in ways she hadn't smiled for me in months. Then there were the plans. Dinner reservations, hotel bookings, even a couple of messages about how they'd keep it quiet, since she hadn't told me yet. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was planned, calculated. She'd been lying to my face for weeks, if not longer. I put the phone down, my hands shaking. She had asked for an open relationship as a cover for what she was already doing.
I stared at her sleeping form, disgusted.
The woman I thought I knew had turned into a stranger. A liar who had made a fool out of me. But if she thought she was going to get away with this, she was dead wrong. This wasn't over. Not even close. That evening, I couldn't hold it in anymore. The anger, the betrayal, the humiliation. It was all boiling to the surface. Madison came home late, as usual, humming to herself as she dropped her bag by the door. "Hey, babe," she said, flashing me a smile. "Sit down," I said, my tone cold. Her smile faltered. "What's wrong?" "Just sit," I repeated, pointing to the couch. She hesitated but eventually did as I asked. I stood in front of her, her phone in my hand. "Want to explain this?" I asked, tossing it onto the coffee table, open to the messages with her lover. Her face went pale. She reached for the phone, but I stopped her. "Don't bother deleting anything," I said sharply. "I've already saved it all." Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "So," I continued, my voice dangerously calm, "this is why you wanted an open relationship? So you could justify screwing someone else while I stayed faithful? James, it's not what it looks like. Don't you dare," I snapped, cutting her off. "I've read everything, Madison. The messages, the photos, the plans. Don't insult me by pretending this is something it's not." She buried her face in her hands, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't know how to tell you," she sobbed. "I felt trapped. I thought." "You thought what?" I barked. "That you could cheat on me and get away with it? That you could make me feel like I wasn't enough, all while sneaking around behind my back." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "You didn't mean to hurt me? Madison, you've destroyed everything. And now you're sorry because you got caught." She reached out, but I stepped back, shaking my head. "Don't touch me," I said, my voice low. "You wanted freedom? Congratulations. You've got it. But you'll regret ever thinking you could play me for a fool." Her tears kept coming, but I didn't care. This wasn't over. My revenge was just beginning. After the confrontation, Madison moved around the house like a ghost, her face hollow and her words few. But I wasn't done yet. She thought a teary apology and a promise to fix things would make me forgive her. She had no idea I wasn't interested in fixing anything. I was focused on tearing her world apart, just like she had torn mine. That night, after she fell asleep, I started laying the groundwork. First, I compiled everything. The texts, the pictures, the dates, and the receipts from her little escapades. I backed it all up onto multiple drives and uploaded it to a secure cloud. This wasn't just about confrontation anymore. It was about control. Next, I made a list of her vulnerabilities. Her career was first. She worked in a high-profile firm where reputation meant everything. Then there was her social circle, friends who'd believe they were pillars of loyalty and honesty. Finally, there was her family, the parents who adored me and thought their daughter walked on water. I also began tracking down her lover. His name was Chris, and it didn't take long to find him on social media. He had a girlfriend. Perfect. The seeds of my plan were forming. Madison had made me feel powerless, humiliated. Now I would take back that power piece by piece. She thought she could use me as a safety net while indulging in her fantasy of freedom. She was about to learn what true consequences felt like. And I wouldn't stop until she lost everything. The next step was dealing with Chris. I wanted him to feel the same level of betrayal I felt, and from the looks of his social media, I had just the way to do it. Chris's girlfriend, Emma, was plastered all over his profiles. They looked happy, vacation photos, anniversary posts, and even a picture of her wearing what looked like an engagement ring. Perfect. I created a fake account, complete with a believable profile and a few generic photos, and sent Emma a message. Hi Emma. I don't know how to say this, but I think you deserve to know what's been going on. Your boyfriend, Chris, has been seeing someone else, my wife. I have proof if you want it. It didn't take long for her to respond. Who is this? What are you talking about? I sent her screenshots of the texts between Chris and Madison, along with a few of the photos they'd exchanged. The silence that followed was all the confirmation I needed. An hour later, Emma messaged me again. I can't believe this. Thank you for telling me. What do you plan to do? I smiled, replying, expose them both. They deserve it. Emma agreed to help. We coordinated, exchanging more details about their lies and planning how to strike. I could feel the trap closing in, and it gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in weeks. Chris wasn't just going to lose his secret affair. He was about to lose everything he held dear, and I was going to make sure of it. With Emma on board, it was time to launch the first blow. She agreed to confront Chris face-to-face, using the evidence I provided. I gave her everything, the texts, the photos, even a screenshot of a hotel confirmation Madison had forwarded to him. That evening, I got a text from Emma. I did it. He's freaking out. I called her immediately. How did it go? I asked, keeping my voice steady. He denied it at first, she said, her voice shaking with anger. But when I showed him the proof, he had nothing to say. He kept apologizing, saying it didn't mean anything. I smirked. Typical. Don't worry, Emma continued. I told him we're done, and I made it clear I'm sharing this with everyone we know. Good, I said, feeling a grim satisfaction. He deserves it. When I hung up, I felt a flicker of triumph. Chris's life was unraveling, just as Madison's soon would. Later that night, Madison noticed my calm demeanor. You seem different, she said cautiously. I shrugged. Just dealing with things in my own way. She had no idea what was coming next. The next day, I moved on to phase 2, making sure everyone in Madison's life knew the truth. I started with her workplace. Her firm was big on integrity and professional conduct, and I knew the scandal would hit hard. I sent an anonymous email to her HR department, attaching the explicit messages, photos, and evidence of her off-the-clock activities with Chris. The subject line read, Urgent, breach of company values. Next, I contacted her closest friends. Using the fake social media account I'd set up, I sent the same evidence to a group chat they frequently used. Kept it brief. You think you know someone. Here's the truth about Madison. The fallout was swift. By lunchtime, Madison's phone was buzzing incessantly. I watched her from the other room as she checked her notifications, her face turning pale. James, she called out, her voice panicked. Something's happening. Someone's sending stuff about me. Really? I said, stepping into the room with feigned concern. What kind of stuff? She stared at me, tears forming in her eyes. You did this, didn't you? I crossed my arms, meeting her gaze with icy calm. You wanted an open relationship, Madison. I'm just opening the doors for everyone to see what you've been up to. Her breath hitched, and she sank onto the couch, trembling. You've ruined my life. I leaned in, my voice low. No, you did that. I just made sure everyone saw the truth. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. But there was no sympathy left in me. She'd wanted freedom, now she could enjoy it, alone. By evening, the chaos had spread further than I expected. Madison's parents called her, their voices loud enough for me to hear from across the room. How could you do this, Madison? Her mom shouted through the phone. James has been nothing but good to you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Madison cried, her voice cracking. It's not what you think. Her dad cut her off. It's exactly what it looks like. We raised you better than this. You've embarrassed all of us. She tried to defend herself, but they weren't having it. Eventually, she hung up and threw her phone onto the couch, her face streaked with tears. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. How'd that go? She looked up at me, her expression desperate. Why are you doing this? You're turning everyone against me. No, Madison, I said coldly. You did that the moment you lied to me, to them, to everyone. I'm just making sure the truth doesn't stay buried. She stood, her fists clenched. You're destroying everything we built together. You destroyed it, I snapped, stepping closer. And now, you're facing the consequences. She collapsed back onto the couch, defeated. Her family, her friends, and her job were slipping through her fingers, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. And I wasn't finished yet. I wasn't done with Chris yet. While Madison spiraled, I decided to make my next move. Using the information Emma had given me, I tracked down Chris at his favorite bar. It was a low-key place on the edge of town, dimly lit and far from prying eyes. He was at the bar when I walked in, nursing a drink. He looked up, recognition flashing in his eyes, followed by unease. Chris, I said, sitting down beside him. We need to talk. He glanced around nervously. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. Too late for that, I replied, my tone cold. He started to say something, but I cut him off, slapping a folder onto the bar. You know what this is. Texts, photos, and everything else you didn't want your girlfriend to see. Don't even think about denying it. He swallowed hard, his face pale. I messed up, okay? It was a mistake. Mistake, I scoffed. You knowingly slept with a married woman. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. He shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet my eyes. Here's how this works, I said, my voice low and firm. You stay away from Madison. No calls, no texts, no contact. If I hear otherwise, I send this, I tap the folder. To your employer, your family, and anyone else who needs to know what kind of person you are. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fine. I'll stay away. I stood, leaning closer. And if I see you again, it won't just be your reputation on the line. Understood. He nodded again, his fear evident. As I walked out of the bar, I felt a small sense of satisfaction. Chris was out of the picture, and Madison was left to face the mess she'd made on her own. When I got home, Madison was sitting in the dark, staring blankly at her phone. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes hollow. Chris blocked me, she whispered. Everyone's turning on me. I shrugged, setting my keys down. Maybe now you'll understand what betrayal feels like. She stood abruptly, her voice shaking. I didn't deserve this. You've ruined my life. I met her glare with calm indifference.
No, Madison.
You ruined your own life. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. Her shoulders slumped, and she collapsed back onto the couch, her sobs echoing through the house. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The next morning, I handed Madison the divorce papers. She stared at them, her hands trembling. You're really doing this? Absolutely, I said, my tone devoid of emotion. There's nothing left to save here. Tears filled her eyes. James, please, I can change. We can fix this. I shook my head. You don't come back from this, Madison. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. She didn't argue. She simply nodded, defeated, and retreated to the bedroom, clutching the papers like they were a death sentence. For me, it was freedom. Over the next few days, Madison tried to talk to me, but I kept my distance. Her apologies, her promises to change, they were all meaningless now. I blocked her on every platform, redirected all joint accounts to my own, and moved her things into storage. When I told her it was time to leave, she didn't fight it. Where will I go? She asked quietly. That's not my problem, I replied. You wanted freedom, Madison. Enjoy it. She packed her bags and left that night, looking back once at the door. I didn't bother watching her go. The chapter was closed. Once Madison was gone, the house felt empty. But in a good way. The tension, the lies, the betrayal. It all left with her. Word spread quickly about what happened. Madison lost her job, most of her friends, and any shred of respect she once had. Chris wasn't doing any better. Emma had left him, and from what I heard, his reputation was in tatters too. As for me, I started focusing on myself, getting back into hobbies, reconnecting with old friends, and even going on a few dates. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Their lives were in ruins, but mine was finally starting to rebuild. Looking back, I realized Madison's betrayal didn't just end our marriage. It forced me to confront who I was and what I wanted. Revenge felt good, but it wasn't what truly healed me. Walking away, reclaiming my life, and focusing on my future, that's what brought me peace. If there's one lesson I've learned, it's this: betrayal doesn't define you. What you do next does. For anyone going through the same pain, trust your instincts, stand your ground, and never let someone else's choices steal your worth. You'll come out stronger. I did.